CGTN, China Global Television Network.
It has been 8 years since Chinese President Xi Jinping introduced the concept of the Belt and Road Initiative to the world. Described as a colossal infrastructure investment, the BRI, also known as the New Silk Road, is designed to usher a new era of trade and growth for economies in Asia, Europe, Africa, and beyond. At least 140 countries globally are signatories to the BRI as at 2021. 46 of these countries are in Africa, where various BRI projects have begun to take shape. Now, Africa and China are set to mark 21 years of multilateral partnership at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit in Senegal later this year. And discussions on the Belt and Road are expected to feature prominently. So how far has the Belt and Road been developed in Africa? What has been its impact on African countries so far? And will it deliver on its promise for the people of the continent? I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. Before we bring in our panel of experts to give us a wider scope of the Belt and Road Initiative, let's first take a look at activity on the ground from one of the new Silk Road's flagship projects. The 752-kilometer-long Ethiopia-Djibouti railway already in full operation. Girum Chala has that report.
Thousands of containers transported from the port of Djibouti to this dry port located just a few kilometers outside of Addis Ababa. Ethiopia's requirements from heavy machinery to everyday goods shipped here. Thanks to the Ethiopia-Djibouti modern railway, a process that lasted days has been reduced to hours, saved on cost and enhanced safety and efficiency. Ethiopia's history as a landlocked nation has changed once and for all.
Since the independence of Eritrea from Ethiopia, we just happen to be landlocked country. And this railway especially connects the Djibouti port, which is almost equal in distance to the Assab port. So for us, changing this landlockedness into landlinkedness by railway. Professionally, in railway industry terms, we call it landlinkedness. So after having this railway, for us in the industry, we feel that Ethiopia is no more a landlocked country.
Commissioned about 6 years back with funding and expertise from China, the 700 kilometers rail truck transports passengers and goods every day from the heart of Ethiopia to Djibouti and vice versa.
Other than containers, we also transport very critical commodities like fertilizer, wheat, and also steel.
China's Import and Export Bank injected billions of US dollars into this mega project. Ethiopians have held China for the fact that they, alongside Djiboutians, have reaped big from this key Belt and Road Initiative flagship project. Beyond this railway, China has proven its commitment to Ethiopia on many other fronts. Aggressive investment in the road, industrial development, and health sectors, to mention just a few. Ethiopia is eager to see more projects associated with the Belt and Road Initiative as they march together into a prosperous future with shared goals. The story is now becoming similar for the rest of Africa too, when it comes to China's unwavering partnership with respective African nations. From neighboring Kenya to Nigeria and Senegal, the hallmark of people-centered Chinese investment is seen everywhere. Many say an infurious President Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, launched in 2013, will transform the world like never been seen before. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, let's delve into the Belt and Roads progress in Africa. And to help us unpack this subject, I'm joined by a panel of guests via Zoom. In Nairobi, Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, he's the former Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. In Beijing, Mr. Zhang Yongpeng, a Senior Research Fellow at the Institute of West Asia and Africa Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Dr. Siko Nkala joins us from Johannesburg. He's a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining in this conversation. Ambassador Mwencha, you have been at the forefront and at the helm of this Belt and Roads progress in Africa. Let me start off with you, if I may, because 8 years ago, Chinese President Xi Jinping introduced the concept of the Belt and Road Initiative, an effort to improve connectivity, improve regional trade and investment through a vast network of infrastructural projects. It is 2021. Start off there for us. What is the status of the Belt and Road Initiative, particularly here in Africa, in terms of the number of countries on board the BRI and physical projects launched on the ground?
Thank you very much, Beatrice, for having me. And I also want to thank my fellow panelists. Yes, the Belt and Road Initiative has taken root in Africa in many ways. First of all, globally, the Belt and Road Initiative now has 140 countries. Of those 140, 46 are from Africa. And in the context of Africa, a number of programs have been implemented, starting with in the area of trade. If you look at trade between China and Africa, trade which was a country of about 10 billion in the year 2000, enhanced by FOCAC, but of course also enlarged under the Belt and Road Initiative. Now this has gone over 200 billion. In the area of investment, a number of investments have taken place in the energy sector, in the mining sector, and also in the infrastructure. In infrastructure, a number of ports have been developed and along some corridors like Mombasa, Nairobi, Djibouti, and you have also West Africa, which have also benefited from the Belt and Road Initiative. And the other part, which I think is not spoken of a lot, is in the area of culture, people-to-people cooperation.
Right.
Africa has now over 50,000 students in China in various universities. You've just introduced one of the panelists who is doing a postdoctoral degree. And also in the area of finance. So there are a number of areas. And I think what we need to talk about more is what is the framework of cooperation under the Belt and the Road Initiative? One is consultative.
Right.
Two, it focuses on green and clean energy. Three, it also recognizes the mutual, equality of the nations that come around the table.
So we're going to be looking a little bit more into that framework of cooperation in a little bit. I do want to rope in Dr. Nkala here to get his perspective on the issues as well, because we've heard a lot about, how Africa is benefiting from trade and investment along the lines of, along the paths of the BRI. In terms of economic corridors that have been mentioned by Ambassador Mwencha there, Dr. Nkala, where are the other areas in Africa, and what are the early signs, according to you, that the socio-economic growth is being spurred along the path of the Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, I think the BRI has been a game changer, not only in terms of infrastructure development, also in terms of especially the development of the local economy, stimulating local economic growth, stimulating productivity in areas that lie along the economic corridors, especially those areas that are along the railways that have been developed under the BRI. You have people gaining employment, thousands of Africans gaining employment, local assets, local commercial assets and residential assets. They gain value because of the railways and the roads that are built along those places. Also, these economic corridors promote intra-continental trade in Africa. They increase the economies of scale because they bring millions of people, connect and link millions of people together. That's increasing markets. So what that does, I think, is it attracts investments in Africa. So it promotes intra-continental African trade. It also makes Africa's products or Africa's economies more competitive in the global economy.
Right.
In terms of making African products cheaper, in terms of moving goods, huge amount of goods and people and services as well, which Africa wasn't able to do before the BRI. So I think the BRI has been transformative. It has had a transformative impact on African economies. As I said, not only in terms of infrastructure, but bringing in the people as well, the Africans themselves.
Ambassador Mwencha, how much of this is re-engineering global politics? What's your take?
The Belt and Road Initiative, first of all, if you look at the number of countries participating, 140, has enlisted, I must say, some negative reaction from a number of countries. And so there is some geopolitical tension, especially for those countries that think, well, it's China dominated, it is taking away their space, because don't forget that the world has always operated in concentric circles where there is a metropolitan and the allied countries which serve those countries which either under colonialism or whatever structure. And so there is that tension. And of course, the Belt and Road Initiative, I don't know whether this was foreseen, but I think that response has not been commensurate with the pressure that has been put, especially pointing out to areas like debt. And yet, if you look at this is second wave of debt that we're having, the first debt was not necessarily caused because there was a Belt and Road Initiative. Debt has always been because developing countries have not had good flows of foreign direct investment, good flows in terms of ODA, and so there is demand. And so, but because of that competition, whether it is raw materials or markets, that negative, approach, particularly the pushback from the West, has been there. Right. But given the fact that a number of countries see the benefit, have come to the table as equal partners, they bring projects that are of priority. Look at the transformation that takes place in terms of opening up economies, as my colleagues have pointed out, right. Reducing the cost of doing business and also enhancing value addition. This is, of course, it's a matter of time. That time will tell the outcome of all these tensions that BRI has enlisted.
So we've seen, though, Ambassador Mwencha, we saw this at the G7 summit in June of 21, when the G7 announced the Build Back Better for the World Partnership, which is aimed at funding the gap in the world's low and middle income economies. How are African countries, though, reacting to this new G7 project?
Well, it's a good thing, and perhaps that's one of the spin-offs of the Belt and Road initiatives, because whereas it may seem like they are coming too late, too little, but at least the response is one of also putting some funds, some envelope on the table that will be available to those countries. The question is, let's see how this is going to be released, because the very countries which have been at the top of mountains making huge cries about the nature of financing under the Belt and Road initiatives have done exactly just that. But it's a good initiative, and we welcome it as Africa.
Mr. Zhang, what are your thoughts on that initiative, though? Is it sincere in addressing the infrastructure deficit in low and middle income countries, or is it just being viewed as an attempt to push back on China?
From the words, I think this is a good initiative, but we should wait and just see what will happen, right? And because I have the biggest doubt that is where are their fundings, right? They have said that should come from, and who will pay that bill, right? I think this could be the biggest problem, right? And so according to the experience, we could find lots of the political conditions attached, and I'm still still question whether or not it will attach some new political conditions or not. But anyway, from the statement is good, and we should welcome. And so this could benefit the choices from the African countries.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there for a moment and take a short break. When we get back, we'll look at how the Belt and Road Initiative is redefining global connectivity and trade. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Talk Africa. Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, Mr. Zhang Yongpeng, and Dr. Sizong Kala are our panelists today. Let's continue with this discussion and start off with you, Ambassador Mwencha, if I may, because I'd like to continue with the conversation on financing. At this second Belt and Road Forum in Beijing in 2019, President Xi Jinping, while pledging a reboot of the BRI, also promised, and I quote, increased transparency and sustainable financing. Now, in the context of conversations around unsustainable debt being accrued, particularly by poorer countries, how has this conversation shaped discussions around financing models for the Belt and Road Initiative since then?
Beatrice, that is a pertinent question. And there are many schemes now that are looking at state in debt. And if you look at Africa as a whole, debt to GDP now is almost 75% of GDP. And because of that, it's clear that servicing some of the infrastructure project could face some headwind. And so Africa is now actively looking at how to finance infrastructure projects without having to have them on sovereign books, this debt. And a number of schemes that are emerging, of course, is PPPs, where you could have debt and equity for those projects. This is one of the models that is on the table. And Africa, a number of projects are already benefiting from this. And I think this is the future and the way to go. Of course, there are a number of projects which will never attract private public partnership, but which will depend on the state. For instance, in rail, around the world, very few rail projects really attract private capital. Those perhaps will be point-to-point and highly economic with very good rate of return, and not many rail projects can meet this criteria. For some of the sectors, these perhaps will continue to depend on the state. But in areas like in the area of energy, in the area of in other sectors like ports, airports, and the rest, this model that I've just mentioned are equally viable. And I think we could also bring, if you look at the number of multilateral institutions which are on PRI forum, this is also a very good avenue so that you diversify resources. I think China has shown the way. China has shouldered the burden, but I think that spread, and I think that's one of the key points of President Xi Jinping at the second forum, where all these were also invited. And of course, there is now an institution which is also specifically earmarked for that, and we should also, with the capitalization of about 100 billion, we should then leverage and bring in capital, particularly for projects that are economically viable.
Dr. Nkala, you know, more African countries have looked to China for financing, as we've discussed here, particularly when it comes to major infrastructural developmental support. And there has been talk about the scale and the motives. And some have called this a debt trap diplomacy. What is your take on this?
Well, I don't think it's a debt trap. Of course, African countries find themselves, a number of African countries, they find themselves in a debt crisis due largely to COVID-19, which disrupted the global economy. I think what Africa has to do from now on is to try to diversify its funding sources, just to lessen the burden on China, because as much as China has been funding African infrastructural projects, it cannot fund the whole infrastructure funding needs. As Ambassador Mwancha said, we face, I think, annual needs of $130 billion to $170 billion for infrastructure development. So Africa must diversify its sources of funds to lessen the burden on China. Yeah, and I think Africa should also develop mechanisms to manage these projects more effectively, because sometimes poor governance and poor management of these infrastructural projects increase the cost, which also piles up the debt, which ends up African countries finding themselves in a debt crisis. Right. So I think effective governance mechanisms, management mechanisms have to be developed to manage these infrastructural projects more effectively, to save or limit the costs.
Mr. Zhang, in terms of financing models here, though, many lenders for the BRI project are operating from China. They include funds like the Silk Road Fund, the New Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Now, in the wake of COVID-19 and the impact that it has had on economies, what are you hearing from lenders in terms of allocations for the BRI?
Yeah. According to the information I get from them, they are always thinking of they should think of the challenges or problems, but they have the confidence still. They are very, very confident of African development and potential, the great potential. And there are quite several Chinese enterprises has come to us to ask where or in the African countries, or which African countries could offer them biggest chances or opportunities to investment. So lots of the Chinese companies are still searching for the opportunities to invest in Africa under the framework of BRI.
All right, so, and I want to get some of your final comments, but very briefly though, I want to look forward because Africa and China are set to mark 21 years of FOCAC at a summit in Dakar, Senegal later this year. Discussions around the Belt and Road Initiative are going to be at the center stage of the summit. Ambassador Mwancha, in assessing the progress of the BRI in Africa, what should China and African countries be looking at at the FOCAC summit?
There are a number of areas that are emerging. One of them has been mentioned, and that's COVID. Africa should now look at the COVID geopolitics that has left Africa in the cold, in the sense that the rest of the world has been able to vaccinate quite a number of their populations. Africa has not done much. This should be one of the top issues that should be discussed, particularly to do with research and development, vaccine development, transfer of technology. The transfer of technology is one of those sticky areas around the world, and which has continued to be there for even multilateralism and even world trade arrangements. So that is one. The second one, of course, we're looking at the digital economy, and this is already in the center of Belt and Road Initiative, the digital corridors. We have seen that trade facilitation, if it were not for the digital world, trade would have been very seriously affected. Africa must move in this area and enhancing development in that sector. And then, of course, transformation of Africa's industry. As I said earlier on, Africa continues to lag behind in terms of export. If you look at the nature of exports and imports, and China is also graduating from some of the law industries because China's demographics are changing, China's cost of doing business is changing, and this is one of the opportunities Africa has to take on board some of those programs.
Dr. Nkala, your take?
Well, I think going forward, I think infrastructure remains key to Africa. It's crucial, especially at a time or in a year like this when the African Continental Free Trade Area was launched. Infrastructure will be key in integrating African countries and African economies and making free trade, the free trade area, a reality. And of course, I agree with Ambassador Mwenjaki on the digital economy, the centrality of the digital economy. We have seen now it has helped make economies more resilient in the face of the pandemic shock. So we need more investment in digital infrastructure in order to better prepare for possible future shocks like the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, the healthcare sector. Africa needs to invest in robust health infrastructure in order to absorb future shocks like the COVID-19 pandemic in the future.
Mr. Zhang, you have the final word.
Okay, I think in the coming FOCAC meeting or coming the years, the both sides should focus on, first of all, China's support to African Union's 2063 agenda, and together with its projects, major projects under this in the various areas, for example, the healthcare and the new energy and the public transportation and such.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much for your thoughts there. And that's all we have time for on Talk Africa this week. Thank you to our panelists for their elaborate insights. Ambassador Erastus Mwencha in Nairobi, the former Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Dr. Sizo Nkala in Johannesburg, a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg, Mr. Zhang Yongpeng in Beijing, a senior research fellow at the Institute of West Asia and Africa Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Well, we'd love to hear your views on this subject. You can engage with us on our social media platforms on Twitter and Facebook, and also catch this and more episodes of Talk Africa on our YouTube playlist. See you again next time on Talk Africa. I'm Beatrice Marshall. Goodbye.